Welcome to Trusting the Covenant, faith, finance, and the freedom of having enough. Today's episode, the transformation from fear to financial peace. Today, Mynor and I talk about how to take the journey from a place of financial anxiousness, fear, worry, and doubt, and move to a place of complete peace, hope, joy, and most importantly, a place where you have positive cash flow. Listen in as Mynor and I talk about the difference that can be provided with Christian financial coaching for both your wallet and your heart. You don't want to miss it. Welcome to today's episode of Trusting the Covenant. Hey there, and welcome to another episode of Trusting the Covenant. I'm David Safford, and as always, I am joined by our founder, Mynor Ramos. Mynor, how are you doing today?
Hey, David, I am doing great, and I'm really just excited about all the information we're going to be sharing today. And it's a beautiful day here in this area. They're talking about a freeze. So looking kind of forward to that because I haven't seen any snow for a long time. So maybe that'll come this time. So anybody that
It is getting close to Christmas, we could definitely use some of the white stuff. That way Mr. Claus can fly his sleigh around. Well, today what we're going to be talking about is the before and after of working with Trusted Covenant and Christian financial coaching, and really exploring what is the transformation that so many people are thirsty for, they're longing for. And so I just want to start by talking about where are people at with their finances, either they knowingly or unknowingly. There's struggle, there's anxiety, maybe they know about it, maybe they don't, but ultimately, Mynor, what would you say is the problem that we at Trusted Covenant are trying to solve?
Yeah, at its core, when we look at finances, personal finances, the real key, the real transformation is positive cash flow. That's what people really want. They talk about financial freedom but it's also something that you feel inside. So it's the intrinsic atmosphere is, I want to feel peace of mind. I want to know that I can go to sleep and I won't have to have this stuff bother me throughout the night. But on paper, right, like the actual mechanism, the result that they really want is positive cash flow. That's kind of where we start.
I can definitely relate to that image of laying awake at night when you should be asleep, when you should be resting and restoring your body and your spirit, but instead you're laying there and your mind is going crazy, scheming like, how am I going to pay that bill? How am I going to move that money from the one credit card over to the other credit card with the lower interest rate? And how am I going to make enough to, and all of a sudden your body is filled with anxiety. And I'm really glad that you articulated both the internal and the external reality, because they're related to each other. It's just that we have to be able to visualize it. And so how do we want to get to positive cash flow. Could you go ahead and just define, what does that mean? I mean, we can probably intuit it a little bit, but just what is positive cash flow?
So the result is people not worrying so much about like the living the paycheck to paycheck stuff, right? And in the financial news, the atmosphere in the workplace right now, there's a lot of layoffs going on, right? So it's a little bit of crisis management or anticipating some different changes. 2024, obviously I'm not predicting anything, but these are the talking points. It's an election year. Housing market, we don't know. Stock market, if people haven't figured out that the market goes up and it goes down and it goes up, and if they haven't figured that part out, then they really need to look at the history of the stock market, right? But it's always a talking point. Everyone talks about that. But internally, people are now concerned with their personal finances, as far as like, what do you need to do with the money that you are trying to manage, and where is it all going? And so there are three different levels of finance that we always talk about. So when we're talking about positive cash flow, for the level one thinkers, these are the people that are struggling, paycheck to paycheck, and they need to figure things out. It's just going to be, can they just operate in the black, right? Can they at least show or somehow manage to a positive cash flow position for the family? And the level two finance folks, that's more of beginning to redirect and having more efficiency. We talk a lot about the velocity of money, the movement of money. And, in level one is, if you don't have money, then you're not going to move that around. So their concern is just make me feel happy inside. Let me just know that there's positive cash flow. Level two thinkers are thinking, or should be thinking, how do we redirect it for efficiency? And so, the level two thinkers are they want their dollars to have babies, right? The little bit of growth. And then
Be fruitful and multiply.
that's right. And then the level three thinkers are more strategic, because they have a lot more, the accumulation is better. Maybe they came into it from family, maybe they were a trust fund baby, right? And so they had, let's say, a head start. Somebody had the forethought of putting them in a good financial position, or maybe there's an inheritance of some sort. Maybe they've just been, really good savvy. Their parents taught them, and they're either business owners or they have assets that are growing. Those are the only, so I mean, it could be somebody who has real estate, and there's cash flow coming from that. Maybe they invested into some kind of business. Maybe they're like a ghost business owner. They don't necessarily have to be there. They have their regular job, but there's this other, asset that's producing, cash flow. And so now what they really need to look at is capital deployment, right? That you see how the mindset is different. Capital deployment means, if there is a market crash, will I have enough to take advantage of what the opportunities that are going to be available? If a house was worth 350,000 before, and there's a significant market crash, and it happened in 2008, and people were buying houses for 40 or 50 or 60,000. That's capital deployment, but you have to be in position to do that. And so some of those level threes are, again, more strategic, they're not worried about the everyday, getting to the positive cash flow, or having the growth. They already have the growth. They're just moving into it a little differently than everybody else's.
And this isn't to say, when we talk about levels, we're really just talking about the levels that people are at in terms of thinking about money. It isn't a judgment call. It's not a statement that someone is more or less responsible or worthy or deserving. It's really just a description of what you're able to see and process. It's almost like height, if you think about it. Like, if you're on the ground level, you have to watch out for traffic. You have to watch out for pedestrians. There could be animals. Versus if you're in a middle floor, you can see what's below, but you also have a sense of what's above, and you start to get some ideas. Versus when you're on the roof of a really tall building, you can see for miles and miles, and you have much greater perspective. Okay, if you're anything like me, then, Mynor, I'm the son of a social worker, the grandson of a pastor. I would say that the money mindset in my family has wavered between 1 and 2 most of my life and most of my family's life. How do I get up to level 3 without cheating, or without playing the lottery? Like, because honestly, when you're down at my level, you're kind of looking up at threes being like, you're a bunch of jerks. You must have cheated, or you must have gotten lucky, and God hates me because I'm down here at 1 and 2. What would you say to that that frustration?
That's a lot to unpack. So you covered a lot of things. So let me try to take them as I perceive them. So the first one is, is we want to make a note that it's not a judgment. We're not putting labels on,
Absolutely.
different. It's just, when we work with clients, they have a different experience. So it's a financial experience, and so we started talking about this, about what's the transformation. Well, that
Mm,
transformation looks very different for the one that's just trying to survive.
mm.
They're not thinking strategic, and I'm gonna own a business. And that's not their thinking. But that's not to say that there are other people who might be in a position where we can start talking about different ways to invest, maybe non-traditional investments, different things that people can do. So we want to acknowledge that there is no judgment. And so what we do is we want to remind people that God is our provider. And so
Mm.
that is a monumental thought, so that when people start to think about that, they start to give credit where credit is due, right? So that label is one thing, that needs to go away. And but we needed to get to a point where we can show people that where they could be eventually. So your question was, how do they get to that point? Well, there's a few things that it's historical, and you can, there's a track record of it. Number one, you got to know your numbers. That people have
Mm.
to know their numbers. They have to know what their total income is. And we there's a step that we help people follow, because some people have variable income, and that's okay. We can get to a point where we understand what their typical income is.
Yeah,
Then we have to
millions of people have that kind of income, so we've figured out the algorithms for that. Yeah.
Very simple to do. I mean, and I've probably looked at people's income. I'm talking maybe in the tune of 30, 40,000 people's like income, and how to calculate that income, where the money goes. But the second thing is knowing the expenses. This is the area where most people fail. And
Mm.
this is the area where we find the inefficiency in not only managing that money, but removing a lot of the anxiety, right? So those are the
Mm.
two, key factors. If you understand where the money's going, then you don't have to worry like that. That anxiety goes down, and then you're able to sleep better, right? So it's important to know that. The other part is it's just the net worth, and this is not something that we were taught in school. So, and I want to make a point. I have a master's degree. I was never taught this. What the master's degree taught me to do was to manage somebody else's business. It was literally called a Master of Business Administration. Run somebody else's business. If people were to take their personal finances and run it like a business, a lot of these things would actually be balanced off. And so let me give you a perfect example.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, how do you mean?
We had different case studies, right? So let's take Dutch Bros Coffee. Let's just,
Yeah.
because it's a new place here, right? Okay, so let's say
So
that
if you don't know, Dutch Bros is a chain. I wouldn't say it's on the level of Starbucks, but they specialize in flavored coffee drinks. If you like black coffee like me, Dutch Bros is probably not the place you want to go. But if you enjoy flavors, hot or cold, people rave about Dutch Bros. And Mynor, you know a little bit more about it than the average person,
I
right?
do. I do. I do. My son works there, and he
Right.
tells me all the good stuff, and it's a great company, great culture. So let's say
Awesome.
that I go in and I start working at Dutch Bros. And so let's say that I'm a shift leader, right? I mean, I'm gonna start working, and I'm already gonna be a lead there. So I get I get a certain amount of money that I have to manage to make sure that people get their change right? And so at the end of the day, I'm supposed to balance, and I'm the hope is that it's zero. It balances out to zero, right? I didn't
You
give
have to
too
count down your
much,
drawer,
right?
basically.
Gotta have that drawer. I didn't give away too much, and I didn't short the drawer, right?
I did this as a cashier. I used to work at a grocery store and I did that too.
think if the majority of people were to manage their finances that way, that there's an accountability factor. So coaching is a lot about that accountability. The other part, the consulting, is more of the like the what the how to. So that how do we get this done? How do we balance that drawer? What are the things that we're going to do to make sure that that drawer isn't short or long, right? One way or the other. We need to. But if the mentality that people had was to be able to take their personal finances and just run it like a business, oh man, it changes everything. So now you have your income, you have your expenses, you have your net worth, and then what you can do with that is you can start to identify how is your savings pattern. In mortgages, one of the things that we used to do, to remember them, an underwriter, all their job was to manage risk. So one of the things that we used to look for was, okay, so this person has a lot of credit card debt, and this person has 2 or 3 cars, and they make good money, but what is their level and experience in saving? Do they have a savings pattern? And we looked at that as a positive. We're like, you know what? Because they have a savings pattern, they have some money set aside. And so that means that if they were to fall into some kind of market downturn, well, they're going to be able to dig into those savings because they have a pattern of savings. That is one of the things that can help a person move from a level 1 thinker to a level 2 thinker to a level 3 thinker. But think about this. It doesn't have to be a lot. It's just a pattern of it, a behavior of savings, right? So now you have, your numbers. And when we talk about how you're going to experience that transformation, you cannot go from worried and stressed and doubtful and headaches and constantly going to the doctor because of all this stuff that you got. Your relationships are failing. Your body is reacting to that, and you can't go from that to sufficiency and contentment and cash flow, positive cash flow, if you don't do the work in between. So here's the best way that I can explain to someone. When it comes to financial awareness and success, it's a lot like me going to a physical, like let's say, a trainer, and they're going to teach me how to do the weightlifting and the reps and running and whatever regimen that I'm going to go into. But who does the work? Does the trainer do the work, or do I do the work? And that mind shift is, people come to, financial coaches and some advisors, and they want them to solve their problems. So that we got to go back to, how did this even start? I mean, we're talking about people that have been in the workplace for 5, 10, 20, 30, 40 years. And these are behaviors that they have never done before. They've never, gone in and looked at their numbers, looked at their debt, look at their expenses, and look at the awareness of where they are as far as their net worth has a lot to do with the way they think in the future. So really, really long answer to the question, how do we get to that level 3? You can't get to a level 3 unless you go and do all this stuff. It's kind of like a step up. And once you do that, though, the transformation at level 3 is its impact. It's being able to do the important things for people. My wife and I were just talking about this today. There's a need, somebody in the area, husband leaves, the wife maybe was never taught how to manage money, or maybe there's a lack of money, and so that's kind of where the community comes in. And they're able to step in, and now that person they don't need a lecture, they don't need judgment, they don't need a strategy like this, they don't need coaching, they actually need funds. And that's when the person that's a level 3 that has the capacity to be able to give back and make a difference, it's where we start to see the transformation. And for a level 3 or somebody who's a giver, it's an internal thing. We talk about the internal and the external. Giving and gratitude are aspects of finances that actually build more than accumulation. Okay, so those are principles that people learn along the way up to being a level 3, where they're going to be at a level 3. I love people that work at corporations. The majority of people do, but people that have a regular job, again, we've mentioned this in prior episodes, more than 80% of them are not happy, because the reason why they got the job was because they needed this position to just be able to pay for the bills. But there was no passion for the job that they're doing. They don't see how it changes them, and they can have impact, how they're going to impact the world. If all they're doing is going in and doing some kind of work for this corporation, that's all they get. They don't have anything internal that changes who they are. And so when we look at the dissatisfaction in the workplace, the way that you can change that is being eventually having your own company, having your own business. Because if some people are familiar with the book Poor Dad, Rich Dad, or Rich Dad, Poor Dad, right? That book, and in there he has a quadrant. He has the ESBI, right? On the one side, on the left side of the quadrant, it's an employee and a self-employed. Basically, a job that you go to, that you report to someone, or self-employed, you own a job. You're in business for yourself, but you still, there's no leverage. So on the other side of the quadrant, you have the business owner, right? And the investor. Now, I didn't come up with that. I think he was brilliant, of coming up with that quadrant to help people understand. Well, that only happens as you understand what happens with the E, the employee, the S as the self-employed. And then, but level 3s, you're really going into some kind of a business ownership where, obviously there's a lot more growth. And then let's talk about another thing that's I think.
Can I throw something in there as well? There are probably some folks who maybe entrepreneurship's not right for them, but ministry might be, or nonprofit might be, where there's something that they want to do and to run that, maybe they absolutely love what they do as an employee, but they still feel called to lead and to cast vision, and they need the level 3 mindset and the resources, the capital deployment to put that ministry into action. And so, because I was just thinking, not everyone can be a business owner. Like, at some point we have to have employees, but the nice thing is that there's this thing called time, and you have generations of people moving through the workforce and the marketplace, and business owners tend to be older, employees tend to be younger. And so it doesn't mean you have to be an employee forever. It doesn't mean you have to be a business owner the moment you get out of high school or college. It's a journey for everyone. But I love what you're saying there, Mynor, and I want listeners and viewers to realize that, God is going to give you specific, calling or specific gifting, or just plant seeds in you that can blossom in all sorts of ways. But those seeds can't bloom until we start climbing these levels, climbing up that building of perspective when it comes to money. As if all you're doing is dodging cars in the street, you're never going to get any kind of enterprise off the ground to have any impact whatsoever. And that's really what we ultimately want this to be about. It's more of the intrinsic turned extrinsic, which is tangible impact on a broken world where things are being made better through recreation and healing. So anyway, thank you for letting me have a little tangent there, or follow up.
Yeah. I want to follow up with that, because I think you brought us something really, really important. And let's measure in real time with GDP. So what is
Okay.
GDP, right? Gross
Mm-hmm.
domestic product. And in its simplest form, it's what's the transformation? What is the value that is created by a business, by an employee. And there's a lot of talk about layoffs right now. Well, the only
Mhm.
reason why that happens is because there's not enough GDP being driven, being
Mm.
created. I think it's brilliant that we start to look at how God has gifted us. And I make fun of this, like if you put me in front of a detailed application that that needs to be filled out, something's going to be missing. Like it's in my mind doesn't work that I can't slow down enough to take care of those little details. There are some people that are administrators, somebody who might be an office manager or somebody like that. Guess what? A business needs somebody like that to be able to keep the business going. But does that person have the ability to be a business owner? Well, there's other ways that they can create that ownership. What if they were part owner of a company, right? What if their effort was rewarded in some kind of equity in the company? I mean, maybe even a partnership in the company because of their ability to transform. You know what? I heard something really crazy. We are literally in the era of people going to job interviews and having 9 interviews within the same company for the same job. Man, as a former HR guy, I'm going to tell you, I don't know. That just doesn't make sense to me. The math doesn't make sense. So they're either collecting data or maybe training some of the new, the new managers on how to, have interviews. But what does that do to the individual who's trying to look for a job? So we're talking about layoffs and people getting retrained and maybe, underemployed. And so when we're talking about the GDP, the only way that you can control the growth is by creating companies, right? So you
Mm.
create a company that brings value to the marketplace. It solves a big problem, and you can see that the growth in the company. That's why small businesses are the rock stars of America. They're the ones that had a dream of having an impact, but the challenges they might have is access to capital so that they can grow more, right? They might have the challenges of the workplace, what's happening right now, where they can't find the employees that we used to be able to to have. It's harder to find employees, it's harder to retain them, it's harder to work with. We're now probably working with 4 different generations in the workforce. There's still some baby boomers. There's the best generation in the world, the Gen X. I'll wait for the pause. No. Then you have the millennials. And then, think about this. The 16, 17-year-olds, that generation is Generation
Z.
Z, exactly,
I think it's
right?
Z.
So now you have a Generation Z employee who was raised with a device in their hands, and all they know is technology, and they got to talk to the baby boomer like in the same workplace. Think about how that's changing the dynamics in the workplace.
So when it comes to basically being in control of your own GDP as an employee, a taxpayer, whatever you want to call it, there's a lot of risk involved in depending on other companies with their own agendas, their own goals. And like you said, 9 interviews. I've heard these stories of people just being run around for months and months on end and then being ghosted
Mhm.
after 6, 7 interviews. They'll hear nothing. And they're rightfully furious. And so I think what our listeners need to take away from this is that a level 3 financial thinker learns how to create their own economy, how to create value that cannot be replaced by another employee, either by creating their own company or their own nonprofit and generating, donations and funding that way, or their own ministry, or, and you mentioned this earlier, private equity, the idea of, I don't, maybe I don't have an idea or a calling to start a business, but I know a whole bunch of people who do. And so I'm going to become a partner, an equity shareholder, something like that, and be the fuel that gets the rocket off the launch pad.
Yeah, and I think that really summarizes it really well. is owning our own GDP, and no one really talks about that. And if you really think about it, you go to a corporate job, you don't know if you're going to be on that list. And so what do? Well, let's talk about crisis management just a little bit to kind of, finish it off, is that if you control it, and if you have some say in what happens with, with your job or your ability to earn an income and create GDP, well, you're sort of going to control the narrative a little bit, and be able to create that and maintain that positive cash flow position for your family. Again, knowing that you're going to have that peace of mind, you're going to have the ability to thrive, your health is going to be better, your relationships are going to be better, and you're going to be able to move forward, knowing that you have some really, really unique God-given abilities to change the world by providing solutions to some really, really huge problems in the world right now. And just taking some of the information that we just talked about. I mean, if you were able, to somehow impact someone who was in the job market and help them either to move into a different industry, or maybe network better, more efficiently, because there's positive and negative aspects of networking. Unfortunately, when there's a job that's already given to someone because they know someone, there's nothing you can do. There's no networking or interviewing, processes that's going to get you that job. Unfortunately, that happens and everybody knows it, right? But so what do? Well, you start to look at your abilities. You start to look at how God has wired you and what you can do to advance that, either through some kind of, developing your and increasing your ability to be in the marketplace and control that GDP. Or if you are in a position where maybe you're level 2 and you want your dollars to start to have babies, maybe investing into a company that causes the curiosity, the way that you look at that company with the vision and the goals that matter to you, and that company is going to solve a problem in the world that you have a value and that you see that you would like to get behind that company, then you can, invest in that company and help it grow, and therefore you're doing your part in increasing that GDP. So, there's so much that we can really, go into this, but I think that it's awareness and knowing the numbers, going into those numbers that we talked about, and then just knowing where you are and where you need to move to next.
I think a great way to wrap up this conversation about this financial transformation in financial transformation in a Christian context is, I think we've spent enough time talking about what positive cash flow is, that it's, these layers of you're in the black to you're actually not just making money, but keeping money. And then you're deploying money at level 3. You're sending money out on mission to get stuff done. But, we've from the beginning branded ourselves around this idea of heart change, heart transformation. And you said something before we started recording this podcast, but you mentioned some other, kind of faith-based coaching, financial coaching out there. And we're saying, why doesn't it work for most people? And you said it's because it's behavior modification. It's all about, well, you're doing this thing and this thing is dumb, so stop it. And could you just kind of bring us home by talking about what does it really mean to have your heart transformed in this? Because, we can do the numbers, but I can figure out my income, I can find out my expenses, I can find out my net worth, I can work really hard to go up from level 1 to level 2, and then even set some goals for level 3. Oh, I'll start a business, or I'll do this or that. But none of that really has anything to do with my heart. So talk us through that, of the heart transformation.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really good segue. And and I'll give you a very, very quick case study. And I had a client that came to me, and first, like, they wanted to file bankruptcy. We looked at the numbers, we're like, there's no way you're going to file bankruptcy. I mean, there's a succession of things that that you can do. You don't need to file bankruptcy. And so later on, as they implemented the information that we put them through. I mean, I'm getting phone calls and texts. And oh my goodness, thank you so much. I did exactly what you did, what you told me to do, the advice that you gave me, and my credit is going up. My credit score is going up. All of this is happening. I feel so good, and that was really the transformation that a lot of people are looking for. So, from the conversation we had before to the conversation we're having later, what saddens me the most? A few years later, they were in a worse situation than they were than before we started. And it was because I at that point wasn't dealing at this, coming at it from the heart. And trusted covenant literally means that a covenant is a more than a contract. It's we're going to go through this with you until you see that transformation. It is not transaction based. It is not, you're not just a number, but you have to do your part. You have to do your part of there's so many things that we can do. We don't put you in a box and tell you to sell everything and to cut up all your credit cards. And probably one of the worst advices that you can get is just, if to just stop it, just like that. Those are the things that allow people the mechanism to get to where they want to go. But if the heart doesn't change and the person's willingness, so let's talk about ability and willingness. The ability you have once you make a decision to change, because you've looked at your financial situation, you say, you know what, I just need somebody to help me get there, but I know that I can do it. And then the willingness is, are you holding on to the belief that God is your provider, that you can see this through, because you know that you've given him that. And then I'll wrap it up with this. One of the concepts that we have is to be able to give a person to creating a deed that they surrender over to God. Think about this, like, my name, I surrender, that the Chevy or the Jaguar, the little house or the big mansion, the $10,000 401k or the $100 million, asset. I surrender all of that to God. And why do I do that? Because it's all his anyway. We are to live a fruitful life and make an impact for the time that we have here on earth. But this is not our destination. I mean, I just hope that people, they need to understand that whether you live for, 40, 50, 60, or 100 years, it's temporary. And a lot of people make perpetual decisions and solutions for something that's very temporary. I think the easiest way to do it is just like hold it with an open hand, knowing that your heart is, you have given your heart to God to help you manage it. And so I think that this is what would help people do this: to be able to breathe, to be able to think clearly, to be able to let it all go and surrender it to God, so that they can begin that life transformation of knowing that all of that they have, everything that they own, isn't theirs. It belongs to God, and we're going to use it for his glory.
Thank you for that, Mynor. And if I can be a little bit vulnerable with our listeners here, all of this is actually very, very relevant for me right now. And, for those of you who don't know, Mynor invited me to come on board with Trusted Covenant and be kind of our messaging, our storytelling leader. And, that's all fantastic. But I'm also, I've been trying to build my own business, doing my own thing. And that's coming out of 17 years of being a classroom teacher. And for a very long time, I have wanted to be able to step away from classroom teaching, just because I don't think it was ever really where my heart was. I love teaching people. I love working with people. And I also love young people, but some of the nitty gritty of teaching has never been my passion. And as I get older, that just becomes even more solidified. So recently, when some things didn't go the way I expected with my business, I had to step back into the classroom. And I'll be honest with you all, that was not something that I was happy about. It's something I'm still struggling with. And in this transition, I've learned two things about God as a provider. And I hope that these are encouraging to you, especially in the context of what Mynor is encouraging us and teaching us with remembering to breathe, remembering to think clearly, and then to trust that God loves you. And so the first thing is just that, is that at some point you have to make a decision that either the creator of the universe loves you or hates you. I don't think he's ambivalent about you. It's you don't send your son to die on a cross for people that it's like, meh, I don't care. So either he loves you or hates you. And scripture is pretty darn clear that there is a character out there trying to convince you that God hates you. He's not trying to convince you that God loves you. So logically, and again, it actually helps me as an emotional person to fall back on some logic when I'm feeling overwhelmed. It's that narratively, very clearly, God loves me very, very much and wants to provide for me. But then the second thing that I'm learning, and this is so important for some of us who have a lot of guilt and a lot of shame about money and about other things. But I definitely have it about money because I grew up as a level 1, level 2 thinker. And I think that's something else. I think level 1 thinkers have the most guilt and shame because there's the highest consequences. When we screw up, it hurts a lot more versus if you're level 3 and you have a massive reserve, you can usually deal with small issues with a quick flick of your pen or swipe of your credit card. But anyway, I struggle with a lot of guilt and shame. And what I've learned is that our God is not petty. He is not human in that sense. And that's good news too, because Jesus, if you read the 4 gospels, Jesus was never petty. The only time he was seemingly petty was with a fig tree that he cursed when the fig tree didn't give him figs. But it turns out the fig tree was actually a symbol of the temple, and that's a whole different thing. Jesus was never petty, which means that God is not petty. And I think something that Satan has tried to teach me about money is that anytime I screw up, if I see a vehicle I desperately want, if I see a Rivian truck on I-40 going through Knoxville, and I'm like, oh, I want that truck, my subconscious tells me I shouldn't have coveted it. I shouldn't have wanted it. God is slapping me for my sin. And my business isn't going to be successful. And my students are going to be a bunch of jerks and so on. And that's a lie. That's not true. And so in this heart transformation, it's not just about money, but money is really the part of the iceberg that's above the water. It's really easy to see how we spend, how we save, but it's all connected to what's under the water. And what's under the water is who you think God is compared to who you think you are, how you think you deserve to be treated by God. And so part of getting your money right is getting your story right. And that story has a savior involved. And Mynor and I are actually going to talk to you about that savior. And it's not about what you should or shouldn't do. It's about the why. It's about where our trust is. Because I love how you put that, Mynor, that it could be a shack or it could be a mansion, but we have to surrender it. And it's one of the hardest things to do. And yet the tiniest little house and the biggest mansion can be an idol. My little Honda Civic hybrid can be an idol, and so can a Rivian truck. It's all relative. You know, we quoted it the other day in one of our episodes. That's the dollar that makes you forget the Lord, or the dollar that makes you curse the Lord. Yeah. If you are full or hungry. So anyway, I really appreciate you taking us to this place of talking about our faith, because that's really what it's ultimately about.
Yes. And thank you for, sharing your, in a vulnerable way, your own experience. It's almost like a testimony, of what the clients actually go through. And we don't have the time for me to tell you all the failures and all the successes, but there's a lot of it too. And I think that's what makes it possible for us to work with people that we've been down in the trenches and we've experienced all of that. or some variations of it. So, we can certainly, sympathize with people and help them to get on that track, that God wants us all to
Yep.
be able to get on.
So it doesn't matter who you are or where your finances are at. Mynor can definitely help you, and Trust and Covenant can be the game changer for you, whether it's just getting in the black every month and having that positive cash flow, whether it's, overcoming the threats to your legacy and dealing with the government and creditors and predators who may be coming for everything you've worked for. If it's just simply you make 6 or 7 figures, but you can't sleep at night, you know that is more people than you might think. If you're like me and you're like, I make a government salary, how can people not sleep if they make $1 million? There are lots of millionaires who feel broke. It's all that heart. It's not the size of the bank account, it's the heart behind it. So any final words for us, Mynor?
May God grant us the ability to trust him fully.
Amen to that. Well, Mynor, thank you so much for your time today. And thank you to you for listening to Trusting the Covenant. We'll be back next Monday with another episode. Catch us on YouTube or Apple Podcasts, and don't miss another episode where we are taking you towards that feeling, that freedom of having enough. Y'all have a great day.